three little buildings in three different graveyards. One in Kildalkey, one at Rathfy, and another at Dunor near Drogheda. What were these little buildings? What purpose did they serve? Well, in the early 1800s, bodies were much in demand for anatomy classes, for dissection. And in those days, bodies could not be obtained legally other than executed criminals. So how did the anatomy schools get around this? Well, they began body snatching and paying people to snatch bodies for them. And Meath was a particular area where bodies were snatched and graves were robbed because of our proximity to Dublin and the medical schools there.
The phrase export or die is common in business circles, and Ireland was an important source of bodies for the great London and Edinburgh medical schools. Bodies had to be fresh and there was no refrigeration, so sometimes the corpse would be packed in a barrel of brine and shipped to England or Scotland as bacon, or in a barrel of wine or whisky, which gives a new meaning to the words full-bodied. When the body was disposed of, the wine and whisky was sold. One barrel was labelled Irish cheddar. Of course, teeth were extracted from corpses as well to make false teeth. A body snatcher could expect to receive anywhere between 3 and 6 months' wages for a fresh corpse. The corpse itself was usually stripped of belongings. To steal belongings was considered a more serious offence than body snatching itself. In fact, it was a hanging matter. Stealing a corpse only resulted in a fine and imprisonment. Adult remains usually fetched £2, while children's bodies were sold by the inch. To prevent body snatching, iron coffins were used, also grave slabs or spiked grave surrounds. The body snatchers would dig at the head of a grave with a wooden shovel. A metal one would cause too much noise. Digging would have been easy. Bodies weren't buried 6 feet under in the 1800s as they are now. When they reached the coffin, they broke through and attached a rope around the corpse under the arms and pulled the body from the grave, or else attached a hook. The whole process took about an hour because the soil was loose and digging was done by relays of men. The body was stripped of grave clothes, which were scrupulously buried again. Kildalkey graveyard had a watch house or a guard house where a retired soldier might keep watch for a couple of weeks after the body was buried. Rathfy and Dunor graveyards also. Others organised night watches over the grave for the first 2 or 3 weeks after the death, long enough for the body to have decomposed to a state that it would no longer be a good specimen. Sometimes shots were fired between grave robbers and the relatives watching the body. These people who were watching the body were working the graveyard shift.
In some cases, the robbers couldn't even wait for people to die. In a famous case in Edinburgh, Burke and Hare killed 17 people so that they could sell their bodies to the Edinburgh medical schools. Burke and Hare were both Irishmen. The Anatomy Act of 1830 allowed human corpses to be used for learning purposes, and this essentially ended the body snatching trade.